The people on this plane about to touch down in Stansted have spent 11 days trapped in Khartoum.
A nightmare. Imagine being surrounded left, right, centre. Bombings, shellings.
Yesterday, the dash for an airfield through a war zone.
The bombing all the time. The house is shaking and we are very frightened.
Today, touchdown. People like Shama Nadibu and her mother Fada, safe at last.
Tell us what it's like to be back.
Oh, I can't. Like I was born again. It's...
Did you ever doubt that you would be able to come back?
Anytime. I said to my daughter, we'll not make it, thankfully. I thank the government for everything they did, and the military people, the RAF. They are very helpful. They are very, very helpful. They are very kind.
Her daughter Shama works for Save the Children in Sudan.
When do you think you might be able to return?
I'm hoping within a month if this settles, we hope. You fear for your colleagues, your friends, your family, everyone you've known back home, and it's just the unknown at the moment. It's two men with egos that are fighting and using people as a camouflage. It's never okay.
But you're determined to return?
Of course.
301 people have so far been rescued on the first 4 British evacuation flights. More planes are coming. Downing Street described the operation out of Khartoum as going smoothly so far with no problems with capacity. The nightmare scenario of a rush on the airfield or casualties as people made their own way there did not materialise. So, families reunited and a father's relief tempered by anger that this had to happen at all.
It's a nice country, it's a nice people, and the war, there is no meaning for the war. Especially for those children, they're going to remember it for the rest of their lives. They don't need to see that, they don't need to see all this. We were not expecting it, because Sudanese people, they're very peaceful, they're very nice people, they're very simple. Even when the war now, people, they're looking after each other. My dad, my mother, still there. They don't want to leave the country.
Almost everyone we spoke to at Stansted today wanted to draw attention to those left behind, like the thousands of people traversing military checkpoints heading for the Egyptian border. People who made it through sent us these pictures and spoke of a growing crisis there with little by way of humanitarian support. We've also verified this footage from yesterday in Al Janina, Darfur. 500 weapons were taken from the police station in the city, and worries that an ethnic dimension to this conflict is gathering momentum. Dina Gillespie has spent sleepless nights organising her parents' escape, as well as processing the personal trauma, coming to terms with the hope of a democratic Sudan dashed for now.
I never thought they'd be ripped from their country, their home, their community like this. It was something that happened to other people far away. So it's going to take time to process. And we think about everybody back in Sudan and hope for some peace, some resolution, some democratic civilian government process going forward, because this is just tragic.
Finally, the big questions that make safety so bittersweet. When all the evacuees have left and attention moves elsewhere, what will Sudan's generals do then? And who of those left behind will they do it to?
Well, the relief of British families as their relatives return is being matched by the anxiety of the Sudanese people, who fear that once the foreign nationals have gone, the situation will deteriorate. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilson, is with me. Well, what will happen?
Well, I think that this lull in the fighting has been very convenient for both generals because it has enabled them to regroup. And they know perfectly well that once the foreigners have gone, the attention of the world will be on them far less. So then I think that they are likely to get on with what they want to do, which is to try and kill each other's people with absolutely no regard for what will happen to ordinary Sudanese who are running out of food, fuel, water, electricity. And that's why so many Sudanese have been fleeing the capital as well. And I think that there's a lot of bitterness in Khartoum tonight because many people there also say that it's the foreigners who are to some extent responsible for this, because after the coup in 2021, where these two generals were working together, the international community carried on working with them. It didn't sanction them. It didn't say, no, this is unacceptable. It tried to cajole them and work with them. And many people I'm speaking to say that was the missed opportunity. And they're now left with the disaster.
And members of the old regime, meanwhile, breaking out of prison.
Well, the prisons have been emptied, I'm told, in many different cities. Now, one particular man called Ahmed Haroun appeared on state television today. Now, this man is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes committed in Darfur. He said that he had got out of prison, and so had several of his colleagues, and that everybody knew where they weren't going to escape and so on, and he was throwing his weight behind Burhan, the general, as opposed to Hemeti, who's the paramilitary leader. So there he is, on the loose, as it were. And what about Omar al-Bashir? Omar al-Bashir was the leader who was overthrown in 2019. He was also tried and he was put behind bars. He's also wanted by the International Criminal Court for genocide in Darfur. I spoke to one of his relatives today who told me he's fine, he's with the military, he's safe, he had the opportunity to leave the country, but he's chosen not to do that. So there he is. So we see the old regime creeping back, and they are supporting the government forces, the military. And Hemeti, the paramilitary leader, is looking more isolated.
Lindsay Hilson, thank you. Well, let's go to the House of Commons now and join the Minister for Africa, Andrew Mitchell. Thank you for joining us. Let's come to the evacuation first. The window is closing of this ceasefire. There's only a day and a half left officially. Is there any danger that British nationals will be left behind?
Well, we are making clear to everybody that they should make their way to the airport. There's a good flow of people coming to the airport. It's going steadily. We will have more than 300 people out today. There will be in total, I think, about 4 flights. So there's no great backlog. People who are eligible should come to the airport. There's no question that everyone, I think, knows through word of mouth what is going on. And so we must pray that the ceasefire holds and we're able to complete this operation in good order.
Right, but that's 300 out of about 2,000 registered. So if the ceasefire doesn't hold beyond the 3 days, what happens? Does the airlift stop?
Well, everyone knows, and the flow to the airport is steady, but it is continuing. We hope that there will be enough capacity to ensure that we get them all out, and that's how it's going so far. So the critical message I have tonight is that anyone who wants to come should come to the airport so that we can get them home.
Andrew Mitchell, that's the division bell, so I know you'll have to go and vote, and I wonder, you were a prominent critic of the government's plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. Are you going to vote with the Home Secretary tonight?
There's been a much better approach on all these matters by Rishi Sunak, who has made a whole series of changes. I think if you take all those changes together, what the government is saying today is extremely sensible in addressing an absolutely critical problem, and therefore I shall be voting with the government today without any worries at all.
But there is no safe and legal route, is there, for Sudanese asylum seekers, which will be inevitable during this war, including children? You're going to lock them up and deport them?
The Minister responsible for immigration has made a number of concessions on the issue of children this afternoon, and that's been very much welcomed by the House. And you will recall that when we made these changes, the Prime Minister indicated that we would seek to indicate safe and legal routes in the future, and that's what we'll be doing.
Just finally, if you have time, I mean, there is a terrible crisis coming, isn't there, once the foreign nationals are out?
What is required now in Sudan is a ceasefire that binds back to a political dialogue, go back to where they were on April 11th when they were getting very close. The soldiers need to go back to barracks, lay down their arms, honour the ceasefire going forward and adopt the political process. That's what was happening on April the 11th, and that's what we need again.
But will we help with this humanitarian crisis?
Of course we will. Britain is always there in these circumstances, but don't forget that the humanitarians have had to leave Sudan. 5 of them have been killed. It's a very worrying fact that so many people, 16 million before this started, many more now, are going to be in acute difficulties, and because of the situation on the ground, the humanitarians have had to leave. So that is why a longer-term ceasefire is absolutely essential. Britain at the United Nations, with our partners in the region, with the other European powers who are involved, we are stressing the importance of getting back to a dialogue. Otherwise, there will be a humanitarian catastrophe in Sudan.
I must let you go and vote. Andrew Mitchell, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, earlier I spoke to Jermaine Mwehu, spokesman for the Red Cross based in Kassala in eastern Sudan, and I began by asking what he knew about the current situation in Khartoum.
Since the beginning of the fighting, now almost 10 days, many people, they can't go out. They don't have food. They don't have access to medicine because in many hospitals, there is no more medicine. There is no more medical supplies. And health personnel can't move from their home to hospitals. Ambulances can't move in the cities. Many Sudanese, especially in Khartoum, have decided to move from one area to another one. And we see now more and more displaced people, internal displaced people in Sudan, people living Khartoum. But not only Khartoum, the situation is also very bad in Darfur region because there are fightings going on in cities like Al-Fashir, Al-Janina, Nyala.
So have you been able to get any supplies in during this ceasefire?
Unfortunately, no. The International Committee of the Red Cross and other humanitarian organizations, including the Sudanese Red Crescent Society, we couldn't provide the urgent humanitarian assistance to those in need, just because it was impossible to move in the cities due to the security reasons. That's why we called on those fighting, both parties, to facilitate the work of humanitarian organizations so that we can be able to provide urgent humanitarian assistance to those in need.
What are your fears for what happens to the Sudanese once the foreigners have gone?
Our message to those fighting, the two parties, the Sudanese armed forces, as well as the rapid support forces, our message is they have the obligation to protect civilian population, foreigners as well as Sudanese people. It's an obligation for them.
So what is your message to the outside world in terms of what it should be doing?
Our message is about, for the international community, do not abandon Sudan. Even if foreigners are leaving the country, do not abandon Sudan. Do not forget about Sudan. I think this is the moment where Sudanese people need more support from the international community. When it comes to humanitarian situation, that's the moment where Sudanese people need to receive humanitarian assistance from those who can provide it. That's the moment where Sudanese people need to receive medicine, food, and other humanitarian assistance.